Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Since it was my day off, I decided to invite my close friend Alexander for a drink. We found a quiet corner in the bar, away from the noise. I assumed he would stick to non-alcoholic drinks since he had a night shift starting at 7. We both worked at the same paper company, and our shifts alternated regularly. Today, we were waiting for my wife Mary to join us. Although I felt uneasy, I tried to keep my emotions in check. Alexander, oblivious to my short responses, kept the conversation going. Mary and I had a long history. We had known each other since high school and moved in the same circles as we grew up. Over time, both of us grew fond of Alexander, and he became an integral part of our group. Though Alexander was a good friend, he wasn't always the most reliable. His reputation as a womanizer had followed him since his youth. His commitments were often as flimsy as warm jelly. However, my feelings for Mary deepened over time, and it seemed mutual. Our friendship naturally blossomed into love, and by the time we were 25, we were married. On weekends, the four of us often got together: Mary, Alexander, I, and whoever he was dating at the time. Despite his occasionally unreliable behavior, Alexander was always there when it truly mattered. From the start, it was clear to everyone, even my parents, that Mary and I were meant for each other. Our marriage felt like the natural culmination of our relationship. Alexander was my best man at the wedding, although he also managed to cause trouble at my bachelor party. He left me on a train without any money. Luckily, I had anticipated such pranks and hidden some cash and a credit card in my sock. Although the night didn't go as smoothly as planned, I eventually stopped worrying about the expenses. Alexander was genuinely stunned to see me at work the next day. He had already prepared an excuse in case I didn't show up. From a young age, Mary had a natural flirtatiousness. At first, she didn't even realize it, but as she grew older, she learned to control it, limiting herself to harmless smiles and playful glances. It never went beyond that. Crossing a physical line wasn't her style. "Why do you flirt with other men?" I once asked her. She smiled softly and replied, "It's fun. It doesn't mean anything." Even Alexander wasn't immune to her charm. Over time, her behavior became something I got used to, and it seemed strange if she didn't flirt at least a little. One evening, several years after our wedding, I asked her as we left a bar, "Why don't you ever flirt with me in public?" She laughed. "Flirting with your own husband in public isn't all that exciting, but don't worry, I'll save that for the bedroom." And she kept her word. Our life together was filled with happiness, and our careers were flourishing. Alexander and I were both offered the opportunity to become shift managers at work. It required some training, and Alexander took the course first. I followed a few weeks later, which meant I had to spend the weekend away from home. Alexander, being single and attractive, always had plenty of stories about his romantic escapades. I, on the other hand, was married and responsible. Sometimes I'd have a bit too much to drink, but nothing serious ever happened. With the promotion, Mary and I were finally able to start saving for a down payment on a house. We were excitedly discussing our future, starting a family, getting rid of contraception, and settling down. It seemed like everything was going according to plan. But about 6 months ago, I began noticing subtle changes in Mary's behavior. At first, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Initially, our intimate life seemed to have picked up, and I assumed it was due to my absence. But after a few weeks, things changed. Our closeness became less frequent, and I noticed that in public, she didn't flirt as openly as before. She still did, but it was more restrained. Small details started to stand out. The house wasn't as clean as usual. The laundry she usually did during the week was now being postponed until the weekend. Household chores, which she used to do in her spare time, began taking up the hours we spent together on weekends. Something was off, but I couldn't quite figure out what. I started paying more attention. One habit of hers struck me as odd. Every time she returned from work, she would head straight for the shower. At first, everything seemed fine, except for the fact that her showers suddenly became twice as long. I also noticed a significant decrease in her paycheck, indicating that she wasn't working as often. When I asked her about it, She said the supermarket was cutting her hours and hiring younger employees. But when I went to the store, I didn't see any new workers, just the same old team she had always worked with. However, I did notice a large recruitment sign posted prominently. That's when it hit me. Maybe she was seeing someone from work. I couldn't afford to hire a private investigator, and my new job was taking up a lot of time, making it nearly impossible to take a day off to investigate. Even if I could, Alexander would likely notice and ask questions. I wasn't ready to talk about this with anyone, not even Alexander. I was afraid Mary was drifting away from me. I needed undeniable proof. So I went online and bought some small, discreet Wi-Fi cameras. I installed them in the bedroom and living room, and I also put a tracking app on her phone. Weeks went by, but I didn't find anything suspicious. Frustrated, I decided to confide in Alexander. I shared my fears that Mary might be seeing someone else and asked for his help. He seemed skeptical, assuring me that Mary loved me too much to do something like that, but he agreed to help. He offered to keep an eye on her in the evenings when he had day shifts, and he said he would check in on her during the day when he worked nights, updating me on anything he found out. Mary worked at the supermarket stocking shelves, and I suspected her affair might be happening there. If it was happening at work, it would be hard to catch them. Weeks passed, and Alexander didn't report anything. He was confident that there was no affair. He had a contact at the supermarket, and he assured me there were no rumors about Mary. There were rumors about other employees, but none involving her. Despite his confidence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The signs were too obvious. Extra affection, new lingerie. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out. Although her wardrobe hadn't changed much, she started doing her hair more often and regularly applied makeup. One Saturday night, we went to a local bar with a small dance floor. Normally, Mary would dance with both of us, but this time, she spent almost the entire night dancing with me. She only danced with Alexander a few times, and that's when it hit me. Her flirting with Alexander had stopped. She wasn't just flirting anymore, she was with him. How could I have been so blind, trusting both of them, two of the closest people to me outside of my family? That's when everything became clear. I had been blind to the truth, but I needed to gather more evidence. This time, I decided to handle it myself. Mary and I had schedules that often coincided, making it easier for her to hide her comings and goings. But her work hours changed, so we had a calendar with her schedule on it. I reviewed the records of when she left the house, comparing them to the calendar. It became painfully obvious. She was leaving around 9 a.m., even though her shift didn't start until 1 p.m. She often left her phone at home, and to get from Alexander's house to the supermarket, she had to pass by our house. How foolish I had been. The next Monday, I had a day shift, and Alexander had a night shift. Mary's shift didn't start until the afternoon. After leaving for work, I called in sick. Even though her shift was later, she left the house about an hour after me, heading straight to Alexander's house, then leaving a few minutes before her shift started. Our home was neglected, barely cared for because she spent her days there, not here. I took pictures of her going in and out of his house. I needed to be sure. I needed undeniable proof. I didn't want to look like a fool when I confronted them with the truth without concrete evidence. On Monday evening, I decided to take a walk, already knowing exactly what I was going to do. Alexander's spare key wasn't a mystery to me. I knew exactly where he kept it. I brought 2 hidden Wi-Fi cameras with me, confident that among the clutter of his apartment, they would go unnoticed. I had no problem installing one of these cameras in his bedroom. During my last visit, I noticed the apartment was unusually clean, which was rare for him. It made me wonder if he was seeing someone, although he hadn't mentioned anything. I wouldn't have been surprised if he brought someone over. He had a habit of inviting women to his place. But the next day, I saw them together. The kiss Mary gave him was far from friendly. It was something for lovers. I heard her complaining about the mess, and then she immediately started cleaning. When she was satisfied with the result, he took her hand and led her to the bedroom. They stayed there for 2 hours. That was enough for me. I couldn't make myself watch what happened next. The pain was unbearable, and I saved the recording for later. That was last week. When Mary asked why I had become distant, I told her I wasn't feeling well and wasn't ready for intimacy. With my parents moving, I suggested she come with me to visit them for the weekend. There was no space for intimacy there either. It just felt wrong, especially after what I had seen. Besides, one of Alexander's remarks on the recording made me even more suspicious. After we returned on Sunday, neither of us felt like cooking, so I suggested ordering Chinese takeout. I volunteered to pick it up. On the way, I drove close enough to Alexander's apartment to connect to his Wi-Fi. My suspicions were confirmed. Then I texted Alexander, suggesting we meet at a pub before his shift. I arrived early and ordered drinks, one for me, one for him, and one for Mary. When Alexander arrived, curiosity flashed across his face as he asked what the meeting was about. I told him I'd prefer to wait for Mary. His face darkened slightly. He only drank half of his cocktail, not wanting to get drunk before work. Soon, I received a message from Mary saying she was on her way. I left my phone on the table, screen up, waiting for the next message. When Mary arrived, she slid into the seat beside me, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. She glanced briefly at Alexander and then looked back at me with a smile. "So, what's the secret?" she asked in a playful tone. I leaned back in my chair and calmly said, "It's quite simple. How long have you two been seeing each other behind my back?" The shock on their faces was exactly what I expected. I had hidden an old mobile phone in the corner, recording the entire conversation. Mary's voice wavered as she said, "It's not like that. Why would you think that? We're not doing anything wrong." Alexander raised his hands in a defensive gesture, his face flushed. "Man, this is crazy. We'd never do that. You're just paranoid." Both of them were clearly shaken. That's when I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out a few photographs. I slid them across the table, pictures of them holding hands as they entered his bedroom. The timestamps confirmed everything. 2 hours later, they came out, and one of the shots captured them kissing like lovers. Mary's face turned pale when she saw the images. I pulled an envelope from my other pocket. Inside was a separation agreement I had prepared. I tossed it on the table in front of her. Mary opened it, her hands trembling as she read the document. Her voice cracked as she began to plead. No, I don't want this. I'm so sorry. Please, I don't want this." I leaned forward, my voice remaining steady and firm. "You still haven't answered my question." "How long has this been going on?" I asked, maintaining a calm but threatening tone. "I'm going to ask a few questions, and I already know most of the answers. One lie and it's over. I'll sign this, and by tomorrow I'll be sitting across from a lawyer. Is this a separation? It's going to turn into a divorce." Mary's expression faltered, and I could almost hear her thoughts racing in panic. In her mind, this separation was temporary. She believed she'd find a way to fix things, that we could restore our relationship before it became final. But I wasn't offering a pause. This was a line not to be crossed. Alexander spoke next, his voice quiet, filled with guilt. "It's been going on for 6 months, he admitted. "I'm sorry, my friend." "We didn't plan this," he continued, avoiding eye contact. "I've loved her for a long time, and she loves me too, but she loves you more than she loves me. I'm sorry. We should have stopped before it got this far." I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. "I won't let this continue. You've both already caused enough harm." I didn't need to torture myself by going through the recordings. Seeing them together in bed was more than enough. But now it was Mary's turn to explain. "It started when I went to his apartment while you were in class," she said quietly. "His place was a mess, and I cleaned up. We ended up on the couch, drinking wine and watching a movie. He joked that we looked like an old married couple. Then he kissed me. And that's how it began." I clenched my jaw, feeling the anger boil within me. "You felt guilty," I said sharply, "but not enough to stop, right?" Her face darkened, filled with regret. "I'm so sorry. We shouldn't have let it happen. But with him, it was easier." I stared at her intently, my patience wearing thin. "Didn't he say you love him?" "I love you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've always had feelings for him, but you're the one I truly love. That hasn't changed." She avoided answering the question, so I pressed again. "Do you love him?" Her eyes dropped, and when she spoke, it was barely audible. Yes, I love him. Then, as if trying to soften the blow, she added, but not as much as I love you. I'm sorry. Desperation was clear on her face and her voice shook. Can we fix this? I'll do anything. Please. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her confession continued, revealing even more. Yes, I love him. But I love you more. I'm so sorry. I didn't want it to go this far. But you can love more than one person, can't you? Over time, my feelings for him grew, and in the past few months, it became something more. It all started when you weren't around. Silence fell between us until she broke it with a quiet question. How did you find out? It wasn't hard, I replied coldly. You stopped flirting with him, and with me too. You said you didn't feel that way anymore. So, all those moments we've shared recently, was that just guilt? I asked, watching her closely. She met my gaze. Partly, yes. I'm sorry. But there were moments when I genuinely wanted to be with you. You're better than him, she added, though to me her words felt hollow. I put it all together last week, I continued, never taking my eyes off her. What would you have done if we started a family? Whose child would it be, mine or his? Her face turned pale, and panic filled her eyes. Yours, of course, always yours. I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. And how can I believe that? How do I know you're not lying? Her desperation grew, and her response became more frantic. We're not like that. I would never deceive you like that. I'd never pass his child off as yours. I raised an eyebrow, clearly expressing my skepticism. How can I know that? You could lie about anything. Her voice trembled as she replied, No. We've already discussed this with Alexander. We knew that the moment would come when we'd have to stop as soon as we decided to have children. He nodded slightly, showing that he understood what I was talking about. I continued. But I overheard Alexander saying that he's ready to start everything again as soon as the baby is born. Her eyes widened in surprise as she looked at me. No, I will be completely yours. We will have real commitments. Alexander, he was supposed to be the godfather. We've discussed this already, haven't we? I replied, trying to keep my tone even. But then I saw that video. I heard you tell him, I love you. The same words you said to me this morning before I left for work. You can't love both of us. So who is it going to be? Him or me? You need to choose right now, not later, not tomorrow, right this second. She reached out, her voice trembling. You. It's always been you. Forever, she whispered. I'm sorry. I won't see Alexander anymore. I choose you, she repeated, as if trying to convince herself. I'll fix everything. I'm so sorry. I looked at her, not believing it. That's great, but what's going to stop you from betraying me again? She hesitated, not knowing what to say. I don't know, but I'll find a way. We can change everything. We can even move in with your parents if you want. I love him, yes, but I love you more. I'm sorry. I can't control my feelings, but I want us to have children. My gaze shifted to Alexander. So when I asked you to watch Mary because I suspected her of cheating, you lied and said she wasn't? He simply nodded, confirming the truth. Mary's head whipped around to him. Why didn't you tell me he thought I was cheating on him? She asked. Because you would have stopped, and I couldn't let that happen. I love you. Of course he'd say that. It was as if I had written his lines myself. I see, I muttered, showing another picture. This time it was him with Barbara Miller, our boss's wife, cozied up on a couch. I played the video where his voice could be heard. Sorry, I love you. Let's run away together from your husband. And what about Patricia? I asked, showing another photo where he was lying in bed with a dark-haired woman embracing her. I played the video where he whispered, asking when he could see her again. Mary sat there, stunned, tears streaming down her cheeks. Funny, I thought. Do fish cry? I finished my beer, got up, and grabbed another one from the fridge. I had no desire to deal with these two any longer. Later, I'd listen to their phone conversations to see if anything interesting came up. I was already prepared for it. Sitting back down, I turned to Mary. Actually, we're not moving anywhere. I think we'll stay right here. Alexander's face turned pale. I can't move. My parents are here. They need me. You'll be moving sooner than you think, I said. I sent Mr. Miller an excellent collection of your extracurricular activities with his wife. I leaned in closer, a smirk on my lips. You really should have cleaned up better on that couch. And I remember you telling her that you loved her more than anyone, asking her to leave her husband for you. Looks like you can love more than one woman after all. At that moment, my phone vibrated with a message. I glanced at it. Looks like our boss is waiting for you at the office. I'm sure he'll stay late to make sure you two can have a chat. I slid a few more pictures of Alexander and Mrs. Miller across the table. Finally, Mary grasped the full scale of what was happening. Her voice sliced through the tension like a blade, her fury palpable as she screamed, "You're a liar! You betrayed me!" The bitter irony of the accusation hung in the air, coming from someone who had deceived, now accusing another of the same sin. Alexander didn't linger. Without a word, he disappeared quickly, not even looking back. Mr. Miller, tall and imposing, remained in place. Mary reached out, her voice trembling. "Forgive me, darling." Her apologies flowed endlessly. "I'm truly sorry. We shouldn't have let this spiral out of control. Let's just forget about this break. I'll fix everything. I'll do whatever it takes. I want to save our 6-year marriage." Her desperation was obvious. "Anything. Just don't leave." I calmly told her to stay put while I walked to the window. My suspicions were confirmed by what I saw, prompting me to make a call. 911, I need to report an incident, I told the operator. Outside the pint bar, there's an assault happening. You should send assistance. I chose not to reveal my identity. I didn't want to get involved in the aftermath. If they wanted to find me, they had my number. The previous message I received had been from Mr. Miller. When I returned to Mary, she was still crying. "I'll do anything you ask," she repeated, her voice trembling. I couldn't control what happened, but I know it was wrong. When it started, I didn't know how to stop. "I'm so sorry," she continued, her voice filled with regret. "We should have been stronger. I hate that I hurt you. I'll do whatever you ask. Just don't involve anyone else. I'll always look perfect for you." Her words faded, and another thought crossed my mind. "So you didn't use protection, did you?" I asked, locking eyes with her. She looked shocked, her eyes widening. "I'm on the pill," she muttered. I leaned in closer, studying her face carefully. "And besides you and Barbara Miller, how many other women has he been with? We both know about Patricia, that one random time, but this isn't just about pregnancy, is it?" A flicker of irritation crossed her face. "I guess I should get tested." I nodded. "That's probably the best option," she sniffled. "First thing tomorrow." Her next words were barely audible, a plea. "Please take me home. Let me be with you again. I swear, nothing like this will ever happen again. I promise." "When you're clean," I replied coldly. "But there's something you need to do first." "Anything, darling. Whatever you want. On the way home, we'll stop by your parents. You'll tell them everything." Her face went pale. "No, please, no, I can't do that. I can't hurt them like that." "If you can't do that, you can't do anything for me. That's the condition." The finality of my words seemed to crush her. "I guess that's where we end this." I pulled out the divorce papers, signed my name, and handed them to her. She stared at them, her resolve crumbling. "Fine, I'll do it. I'll tell them." "Good. We'll stop by on the way. And don't worry about sharing all the filthy details. Just tell them you had an affair with Alexander and how long it's been going on. Simple as that." When we stepped outside, we were greeted by flashing lights, an ambulance, and several police cars. "Where did they all come from?" she whispered. From the end of the weekend until today, it was rare to see even a single police officer in the area. But now, 7 had gathered at the scene. We approached the front door of her parents' house. She was still crying, trying to pull herself together. Her mother gently led her inside while her father stayed by the door, visibly anxious. "Honey, what's going on?" her mother asked with concern in her voice. "Is everything okay? Is Michael all right?" She nodded slightly, wiping away the last of her tears with her hand. "Yes, Mom. Michael's fine. Well, not exactly. She paused to collect her thoughts, took a deep breath, and spoke again. Mom, Dad, I need to confess something. For the past 6 months, I've been involved with Alexander. It was a terrible mistake, and I deeply regret it. We talked, and Michael, he forgave me. Her father stepped closer, now standing next to her mother. Both turned their attention to me and the suitcase I had brought with me. I couldn't hold back any longer, and my voice cut through the tension. I never said I forgave you. Mary's head snapped toward me, her face turning pale at my words. I dropped the suitcase to the floor, the sound echoing through the room. Her eyes widened, and her hands flew to her face, covering her mouth, shocked by the truth. 6 years ago you chose me, but then you decided it wasn't enough. You needed him. I'm sorry, Mary, but one apology isn't enough to fix this. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I pulled a thick envelope from my pocket, its weight feeling much heavier than its size, and handed it to her. Her father, whose eyes now glistened with tears, reached out and took it from me. Divorce papers, I said in an even tone. For the past 6 months you've lived as though you were married to him. All I've received from you are guilty confessions, followed by declarations of love for him. I even saw you cleaning his apartment. Do you even realize that the only thing that mattered to him was that you cleaned for him? It made his life easier so he could impress other women. Our marriage will end in 60 days. The apartment is up for rent. You can either stay there or return to your parents, if they'll have you. I don't care. Just let me know if you want to keep the apartment, and I'll come by to pick up my things. Through her sobs, she could barely manage to say, "But I love you. I really do love you." I shook my head, and my voice became colder than I ever thought possible. That wasn't enough, Mary. You made your choice when you chose a liar who betrayed all of us. He wasn't just a cheater, Mary. He betrayed you. He betrayed Mr. Miller, and in some twisted way he even betrayed Barbara by choosing you. If you ever wondered what kind of husband he would be, I hope you figured it out by now. Without saying another word, I turned and left. She thought she could love 2 men, but in the end, she gave herself to someone who meant less. And judging by her face, even the physical side of it wasn't worth the price she paid. Her parents couldn't stand the shame and immediately threw her out of the house. We won't tolerate such a disgraceful daughter in our home. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.